Hello, welcome back to the woods. And we're going to start with a bit of a story. Now, as a teenager growing up in the late 1970s, at times family life was a little bit tough, and there's one Christmas I particularly remember. My stepdad, who worked in the building industry, hadn't any work for weeks. My mum's wage, and she didn't earn a lot back then, barely covered anything at all. Obviously Christmas was coming up, but also at the end of the month, so was the rent. So we were kind of resigned to the fact that that year, well, there weren't going to be presents. At this rate, there might not even be food on the table, when my stepdad had this brilliant idea. He remembered that where he grew up, which was a village outside of the town that we lived, in the winter, in some local woodland, mistletoe grew high up in the trees. So what we did, he and I, we got some baling twine and we walked the 5 miles out to this big bit of woodland on an estate, and we've got our baling twine, we're all good to go, when he says, I haven't got a saw. At that point I reached into my pocket and I produced this, my German army knife. Trusty, dependable. At that point I hadn't had it that long. So up the tree I climbed, and then once I was wedged out on the end of a branch within reach of the mistletoe, I took my trusty German army knife, broke out the folding saw and started sawing bits off and dropping them to my waiting stepfather down below. And we spent a good 3 or 4 hours gathering as much mistletoe as we could. With that done, we bound it up in a big bunch with the baling twine and we dragged it out to the road. My stepdad went down to a public phone box, because there was no mobile phones back then, rang a mate who, under the cover of darkness, pulled up in a rusty old transit van. We loaded it all in the back and drove it back to our house. And then once it was back there, well, again, trusty German army knife, we cut it down into small bunches, split down the baling twine and made these bunches up. And the following day, which must have been, I don't know, 22nd, 23rd of December, we ventured out into the town centre with bin bags full of these little bunches of mistletoe, which we promptly sold to people, and I think we made about 300 odd quid, and suddenly Christmas was saved, all down to my little German army knife. And this little knife, this isn't the original, but it's been pretty much my EDC ever since. Last year I changed it over to a rate in 32, but even now I still sometimes find myself reaching for this little bit of nostalgia, and it is a cracking item. It's also a cracking item you can't get hold of anymore. German Army stopped issuing them quite a few years ago, and it was replaced with another Victorinox pocket knife, but this one has a single-handed opening blade, and it's a locking blade, which makes it not an EDC, which is a great shame, because these were great knives and you can still pick them up on the surplus market, but they're getting rarer and rarer, which is a great shame, because for anyone looking for a very simple EDC, this is the way forward. Now, I have seen on the internet something that looks very, very similar, one of these, and this one's an all black version. I have seen regular green ones, and these are described as NATO style pocket knife, and they're actually a straight copy, a clone if you like. So what I thought I'd do is, well, I'd buy one of these and compare it to one of these. So this little Miltech NATO type pocket knife. I bought from a company called Survival Aids Cadet Direct, and it was the princely sum of £8.95. I think by the time I put postage on it, it was just over £10. It looks incredibly similar, apart from the fact that this one is black. Everything else on it is pretty much identical. And I've been using this for a couple of weeks. I put it in my pocket, or to be more exact, I put it in my little EDC pouch, which lives on my belt, and I've just used it instead of my regular one. And it's got all the same features. So it has a main blade, it has the saw blade with the bottle opener, screwdriver, and a little nail file, exactly the same. It also comes with the little guard which sits over there, which, yeah, mine's long since gone on my regular one. On the back we also have a corkscrew and also a reamer. So all the tools are exactly the same, but does it perform the same? I used it for a couple of weeks for just my normal everyday tasks that I do, and to be honest, it didn't really vary that much. One thing I did notice about it is it's a bit heavier. The regular one weighs in at 88 grams. This one weighs in at 113, 114 grams. So it's a little bit heavier, and I can't actually see why. What I thought I'd do is I'll give it a set of tasks, things that I would normally use my EDC for, and I condense them down and put them together as a test. So I did, using the saw for sawing off small side branches, which is stuff that I do with it. I also used it for cutting withies, so small flexible saplings, use them for cutting those. Sharpening sticks, putting notches in sticks, those types of things, and also cutting cordage, because I cut quite a lot of cordage, just to see how the two would get on. So as I said, when I was using this, I did notice it did need a bit of a sharpen. So what I thought I'd do to make it a level playing field is I would sharpen both knives to the same level. So what I did was I sharpened them up so that they're both shaving sharp. So they, well, I had no hair left on my arm, and they both took an edge very, very well. Well, the Victorinox one, it's a proven steel. This, who knows what it is, but it did sharpen up to shaving sharpness. Head-to-head and comparison tasks. So we started off sawing off side branches, which it did pretty well. This one was a little bit slower and a little bit more difficult than the original Victorinox one. However, I think the problem was that actually this silly black coating was actually slowing it down. We then went over to using the blade for cutting various things, main one, withies, etc. And again, this one did very, very well. After that, well, I didn't really get a chance to use the corkscrew, but we did get a chance to use the little reamer. And, well, yeah, not so good. This one is very, very blunt. I think with a sharpen it would be okay. It moves in the same way, it's reasonably rigid, not bad. We then went back to the saw blade. But this time what I used was this front bit, and it's a thing that I use a lot, and I use it with a ferro rod. And this one casts sparks equally as good as the Victorinox, if not possibly better. The square edge on that inside is very, very aggressive, and it seems to work well despite this black coating. With that done, I then thought I'd give it a real test, which was cutting poly rope. And poly rope is horrible. It dulls your blade down like you wouldn't believe. So I decided to do half a dozen cuts, cutting through little finger thick poly rope. And not bad. This one did struggle a bit towards the end. The Victorinox didn't really. It was doing very, very well. With that done, what I then thought I'd do is use both knives to see if I could shave a few feathers. And although this one was no longer shaving sharp, it did shave feathers, as did my Victorinox as well. So now on this one, the fit and the finish probably isn't as good. It looks incredibly similar. However, if you hold it up to the light, you can see light in between those, which you don't on the Victorinox. The blade is reasonable for a folding knife. There's not a huge amount of play in it, and the steel, whatever it is reasonably good. Miltech, I know most of their stuff is copies, and it's usually made in China. There's very little information with to say what steel it's made from or anything else. Its cost, well, $8.95. That's not a lot, and you're getting useful tools and they will perform reasonably well. So if you're on a budget, actually this might not be a bad shout for your EDC. Or if you like this style of knife and you could do with it in several places, so you need several of them, you might want one in the toolbox, one in the car, one in your day sack for work, I don't know, in which case it not costing a lot actually does make quite a bit of sense. So that's the two compared, and it's been quite a tough one because in many ways I wanted this to really fail, because nothing could be as good as this. And while I do use the little rake M32, if people say to me, oh, what do you recommend, and I say the M32, they say, well, yeah, that is quite expensive. But what I always used to say was, well, these don't cost very much at all, which they didn't. You could get them via a surplus shop, but you can't anymore. This does the same job almost as well, and it's really not bad. For £10 delivered, I don't think you can go far wrong. So look them up. I'll put a link in the description box down below for you to have a look at, and yeah, get yourself one. Or if you've got a kid that goes to Scouts and is looking for a pocket knife and you don't want to break the bank, or you're worried that they're going to lose it, again, this could be the way forward. As I said, I'll put a link in the description box down below. So there you go. Now, if you like this video and you found it useful, then remember, hit that thumbs up button as always. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. Also, in the links box down below, there is a link over there to my Etsy shop. Pop over there. There are some of my Greencraft patches. I've just put a load of the small minimal survival scarves. However, they all went very, very quickly. There is going to be, coming up some more of my water filtration bags. They are about to go up in the next week or so, so keep your eyes on the shop for those if you're in the market for a lightweight water filtration bag. And these are the new Mark III version, which I probably will do a little video on, just totally for those, because if you want to get the best out of it, you might want to see the alterations that I've made to it. So also stay tuned to the channel, because there's going to be, I've got a couple of reviews coming up of sort of techie bits of kit. One of them is a follow-on from one I did last year, which I think you'll find very, very useful. Anyway, I've been Neil, and until next time, stay safe in the woods.